and welcome to today's discussion on statelessness and human rights. My name's Rachel Macaulay and I'm one of AIHLI's interns working on the Undocumented campaign. I'm honoured to introduce Christy Chitengu, who will share her incredible and inspiring story of overcoming statelessness. Christy's journeys resonates with millions of others who have faced similar challenges, and her lived experiences have fueled her advocacy work, and she now co-leads the Global Movement Against Statelessness. So Christy, thanks so much for joining us today. Would you just like to start off by introducing yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. So as you mentioned, I have a lived experience of statelessness. I was born and raised in Johannesburg, South Africa, to two Zimbabwean parents. And I am currently a candidate attorney at a law firm in Johannesburg, which practices in general public interest litigation. And my personal efforts, as well as together with the global movement, have been able to raise awareness on statelessness globally beyond the South African context.
That's incredible, thank you. And just to start off with, could you just reflect on your experience of being born into undocumented parents and growing up in South Africa?
Thank you. I think because I had grown up in Yeoville, Johannesburg in my early years, I had been exposed to a lot of other undocumented families and stateless children. I just wasn't aware that was the case, or that it would really, it had these titles to it. And so I was very familiar from a young age, aware of the impact of being undocumented. My parents had been arrested because of the lack of documentation as I was a child. And I think the most vivid memory for me was when I was in matric and my school principal called myself and a few other learners in the office, and she was like, I don't know how you entered the schooling system. I have no record of you. And you need to get documented somehow because you're not South African. And for me, that was the first time I realized that I wasn't South African, even though I felt it and I thought I was for my whole life up until that point. I just knew that there were migrant communities and people were undocumented, but I just didn't realize that I was not one such person who belonged to this country.
Yeah, no, that must have been tough and caused some barriers there as well. So from your perspective and your expertise, what would you say is the most challenging aspect of being stateless or undocumented?
I think the most there's like a practical and like a psychological, like there are two different like challenges that happen at the same time. So I think the first is like access to education. Being unable to enter the school system, or having been in the school system like myself and being posed with a challenge when you're trying to exit the schooling system. That I think is the main thing, especially where basic education is concerned, and that's like a fundamental right for all children everywhere. So to feel like that is threatened, and trying to figure out as a child or as a parent to a child how to fix that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of being stateless. And also, like I said, psychologically, it really is a challenging complex because you're not, like, you feel so strongly and you feel like you have such strong ties to this place because you've been born there, because you lived there your whole life and you went to school and you've been socialized. You can speak official languages, yet you're not considered a national because of a piece of paper. I think that's also like a difficult challenge that I had to grapple with, and feeling like I'm not South African enough, whereas I'm not Zimbabwean because I haven't been there or haven't been able to travel or build relationships with that side of my family. So I think that's one of the main challenges. One is access to education and just psychological beliefs of how you feel like you belong.
Yeah, definitely that sense of belonging was a really big part of it. And so what does it mean for you to have received South African citizenship?
So I think it was so surreal when it happened because it was a very long process from the time I applied, the time I became aware that I was stateless or at risk, and from until I was able to use the law to claim my South African citizenship. It took almost 6 years. And so it was really difficult to once I received it, like I was in disbelief. But it really opened up so many like simple pathways that I didn't like have access to, like access to being able to um, work legally in the country and earn a living, being able to register my child's birth. That I think was the most emotional moment where I couldn't believe that I was able to give my child a birth certificate because I, for so long, had been given a written birth certificate which had no legal force or impact. So I think those are like, there were lots of feelings when I did finally get documented. But those are just some examples of the practical like things that changed in my life that I was able to get access to that were previously.
Yeah, no, definitely. Absolutely. And then just going on from that, so your experience with overcoming statelessness, how has that influenced and shaped your advocacy work in the sector?
I think my experience, one thing that my experience taught me was that um it requires legal intervention to be able to get um your nationality or citizenship. And I hadn't, like, having seen how long it took to use the law and how even after there was court orders or directions from the court, like the realities on the ground were not clear. Like Department of Home Affairs officials still didn't understand what statelessness is or how to enable people access to applying for naturalization. And so because of that experience and exposure through my own journey, I realized that a big part of advocacy to eradicate or reduce statelessness is to empower stateless people with the knowledge of their rights and the right to claim their rights. So what I do a lot of the time is try to inform people about the pathways to gaining to becoming citizens for people who are stateless or at risk of being stateless, and telling them how they can what types of questions they should ask when they are being denied, or if an official is unclear of the law, being able to inform them of the provisions that they can rely on and just the lawyers that they can reach out to for pro bono legal advice. So having seen how you need the law, but also access to justice is very limited. So I try to empower people with like just basic legal literacy that they can use themselves when they are trying to advocate for their stateless, when they're trying to advocate for their nationality. I think it's important to empower stateless people, and because we do have our own agency. We just lack maybe the technical expertise or just the confidence and belief that you are deserving, and this is provided for in the law, and therefore it should be followed through by officials on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. All about certainly raising awareness and informing and educating about statelessness is much needed. And just as well, what's one thing you wish people understood about being stateless and living with undocumented parents?
I wish people knew that stateless people are equally as deserving of the fundamental rights, such as access to basic education, such as access to healthcare and social security. I think a lot of people think like are quick to exclude people because they are not um, like nationals of a place legally recognized, or they lie in this gray area of statelessness. And I think it's important that just general public is aware that everyone has the right to accessing these fundamental rights, and no one should be excluded on the basis of a piece of paper that oftentimes they should already have, but because of poor administration or lack of political will, this process is drawn out. And I wish people were aware that everyone is as equally as deserving and is entitled to the most basic rights.
No, definitely. That's great. Thank you so much for joining us today. And just finally, do you have any closing statements or kind of final takeaway you'd like to tell our listeners?
I think maybe my closing remarks is that for stateless people, I think perhaps addressing stateless people who might be listening and joining in, I think just to let you know that you're not alone and that the journey is very long and tiring. And you might feel like giving up on your case or feeling like you're being sent from pillar to post and trying to get your nationality, but just know that it can be done and it has been done. And I'm a living testament that it's possible. I didn't, before I had access to the global movement and the other stateless communities, I felt like I was in this alone. So if anyone else is listening, I just want them to know that there is a community of stateless people out there who are dedicated, stateless people, and also people with learned experience of statelessness like yourselves who are out there, who are committed to the cause and committed to supporting stateless people. So just reach out and join the Global Movement's mailing list so that you can be part of this community as well and feel like you have other members of the stateless community there to support.
That's great. Thanks very much.